In this video, as I promised twice before, you're going to learn about partials with handlebars. Partials, as the name suggests, allows you to create a little template, which is part of a bigger web page. That's where partial comes from. So think about parts of the web page that you're going to end up reusing across multiple pages in your site. This would be things like headers or footers, where you want the exact same thing showing on every page to give your site a nice unified feel. It'd feel really terrible if you went from one page in a site to another and the header kept switching how it was structured or how it looked. With partials, it's going to be really easy to create a header and reuse it without needing to copy markup between all the pages in your site. All right, the first thing we have to do to work with partials is actually load in HBS for the first time and configure it. Just down below, I'll load HBS in, const HBS equals. We're going to require the module, grabbing it by providing the module name, and once we have it, what we need to do is tell handlebars where we are going to put our partials. These are also files with an HBS extension, similar to the ones we have down below. Now we want to keep them in different locations, so we want one directory for our views that we use with render, and we want another directory for our partials, which we'll learn how to actually use shortly. So what I'm going to do is this. We're going to leave the templates directory in place, but we're actually going to put two directories inside of there. One is going to be called views, and the other is going to be called partials. Now, the three files we currently have in templates, those actually belong in views. So I'm going to take all three and drag them over, and all we have to do to get things to work is to change the views path from /templates to /templates/views. Now, if I was to save things, the old stuff is still going to work as expected. I can refresh the site and I still see my view correctly rendered. From here, though, we can now tell HBS that we're going to put our partials in this partials directory. Then we can actually add some stuff inside of there. So right here, we're going to create another path, const partials path equals. I'll use path.join to once again join together dir name with a string that we'll end up creating. So I provide dir name as the first argument and our string as the second. And right here, /templates/partials, which is the folder we just created. So this path is going to get handlebars to the right directory. Now we can actually configure it, and I'll do that in our little section for setting up handlebars. Now we actually use HBS here, hbs.register partials. Register partials takes a path to the directory where your partials live. We don't have any just yet, but we can still provide that path. The partials path variable contains the path that the handlebars module needs. So that's the configuration side. That's the boring stuff. Now that we have everything set up, let's go ahead and create a partial and see what all the hype's about. I'm going to define a new file in the partials directory, and I'm going to create a partial for the header. This is a header that we're going to show on all of the pages throughout our site, so I'll call this something like header.hbs. So with our partials, we're still using the handlebars extension, and we can still take advantage of all of those handlebars features. Now, what goes inside of here, what goes inside of partials, isn't a complete HTML document like we have here, where we set up the doc type and then set up our HTML element. Instead, it is just part of a web page. So right here, as an example, we can go ahead and just create something like an h1 element. h1, opening and closing the tag, and then we can put some text inside of here. I'll say something like static header.hbs text. For the moment, this will allow us to explore how to use our partials. Then we'll continue to expand on the header, actually putting a dynamic title inside of here. With the partial in place, we can now use it inside of our other handlebars files, which means that we can have this partial loaded in at the top of all of these pages. Let's go ahead and get that done, and I'll start with the help page, which is the page I currently have rendered in the background. Now I'll leave the current h1 in place for the moment, but up above, what I'm going to do is render the partial. To render a partial, we still use those two sets of curly braces like we did when we wanted to add a value into the template in a specific location. For a partial though, we have to add one additional character, which is the greater than sign right here in the middle. Then after the greater than sign, we provide the partial name, which is just the file name. You don't need to provide the complete path, and you don't need to provide the file extension. So for us, that would just be header. Now we can go ahead and save help.hbs, but I'm going to clue you in ahead of time, things are not going to work as expected. I'm going to refresh the application in the browser, and what do I get? I get a really long error message, the actual message being the partial header could not be found. Now to talk about why this is happening, we have to talk about when NodeMon is restarting our application. Right now, NodeMon is only monitoring files with that JS extension like app.js. So if I save the file, even with no changes made, you can see the server is going to end up restarting down below. I'm going to go ahead and save the file, it restarts, I save the file again, and it restarts again. The same is not true with our handlebars templates. If I save one of those files, which I just did, you can see the server has not restarted down below, and that's a problem. Because HBS and Express, they need to load those templates in, and if the server doesn't restart when new templates are created, the server is never going to pick up on them. Now we can easily address this by customizing our NodeMon command. We can have NodeMon restart when our JS files change and when our HBS files change. And to do that, we'll make a small tweak to the command we've been running so far. I'm going to use Control-C to shut down the existing process, then I'll use clear to clear the terminal output. From here, the command is going to start off much the same, nodemon space source / app.js, which is exactly what we were just running. The change is that we're going to add the E flag, which is short for extensions. This allows us to provide, after the space, a comma-separated list of extensions that NodeMon should watch. We're going to provide JS, HBS. Now, if I run the program, we can see that the behavior has changed. If I save my app.js file, the server still restarts, which is great. Now, though, if I save one of my HBS files, like the partial or any of my views, you'll notice that the server once again restarts, which is fantastic. Now, if I was to refresh the page, we would no longer get this error. Instead, we get our rendered document with the title up top from the header partial static header.hbs text. Now let's take our header one step further and make it a bit more useful. Currently, we have 3 pages. We have help, index, and about. All 3 of those have their own h1. What we're going to do is remove those and have that rendered in the header instead. Now you'll remember that we have the value, the title to show, passed in for index and for about, and that's okay. We can continue to use those values in partials as well. So to kick things off, what I'm going to do is make a quick change to all files. Help HBS already has the header in place. I'm going to remove the h1, save the file. Next up, we have index.hbs. I'm going to remove that h1, and I am going to set up the partial. So open and close 2 sets of curly braces, then the greater than sign followed by the partial header. Next up, we'll do the same thing in about.js, removing that h1 and swapping it out with the header partial. So right here, 2 sets of curly braces, greater than sign, header. Now if we visit any page on our site, we're going to see the exact same text. We are going to see static header.hbs text. Here it is on help. I'll refresh the page and it still shows up. We then have / about where we see it, and finally the root of the site where we also see it. Now what we're going to do, instead of displaying this static text, is to grab the title value. So in app.js, for the root, we pass in title and name. For about, we pass in title and name, and for help, we currently just pass in help text. I'm going to modify that to also pass in title and name. So right here, title. for this page could equal uppercase H help. And then I'll provide name, and I'm still the one who created this page and I'd like credit for it. So I'll provide my name and you can put your name in there. Now that we have those three set up, all pages have access to title, and now it can be used in the header. So right here, instead of a static value, we are going to open and close two sets of curly braces, and we are going to reference title right inside like we were previously doing from our other view files. Now if I refresh the home page, what do we get? I get weather. If I go over to /about, what do I get? I get about me, and then /help, I'm going to end up getting the help title showing. Now that we have the header in place, we can add stuff inside of this file that we want to show on every single page, like a navigation bar with links that allow you to switch between the pages on the site. Just down below the H1 in the header partial, we're going to get that done. I'm going to start by opening and closing a div tag for the div element, div being short for division. This is going to create a section of content below the H1, and what we're going to put inside of there are three links. So I'll be using the A anchor element for that. We are going to set them up, and inside of the element between those two tags, we provide the text we would like to show for the link, and I'll just use the page title, which would be weather for the first one, about for the second, and help for the third. So right here I have weather, and I am going to set up href, which is the attribute we set up to specify where this link should go to. We're going to send it to / the root of the site. Now we can do the exact same thing for our two other pages as well. I'll set up A, I'll provide the text, let's link to the about page for this one, and I'll set up the href attribute to / about, which is where we can view that page, and lastly, we'll do the same for help. The text to display is help, and the href value is going to be / help. Now if I save things, we're going to see this navigation bar on every single page. I'll refresh the help page and it shows up. I'll click over to the about page and I see it there. Finally, I'll click over to the home page and it shows up there as well. So being able to use a partial makes it really easy to set something up once and use it everywhere. And if I was to make any changes to the header, I would just change this one file and it would automatically update on all pages where the partial is used, which is fantastic. Now it's your turn to create another partial for the footer. So over in app.js, I have some challenge comments, which I'll paste in up top, outlining what I'd like you to do. Right here. Your goal is to create a partial for the footer, like I mentioned, and step one of that is to set up the template for the footer partial. The goal is to just render a paragraph and print text saying created by, followed by some name, where some name would get replaced with whatever the name value passed in is. For me, it's Andrew Mead. For you, it's likely something else. Now, once you have that template in place, you want to make sure to actually use it at the bottom of our three pages, about, help, and index, and finally, test your work. Visit all three pages and make sure you see your footer showing up at the bottom. Take some time to knock this out, test your work, and when you're done, come back and click play. How'd that go? I'm going to kick things off by creating the partial. So the partial needs to live in the partials directory, and I can call this whatever I like. I'm going to call it footer.hbs, but if you picked a different name, that's fine as well. Next up, we want to add some content inside of here, and the goal, as mentioned, is to just print some text in a paragraph. So I'll open and close my paragraph tags for the paragraph element, then created space by space. Right here is where I want to put the value. So I'll open and close two sets of curly braces, and I will reference name right inside, which matches up with the property passed in, name, name, and name. So that is step one. Step two, we have this partial, it's time to use it. So I'll start with help.hbs. I'm going to put it at the bottom just before I close the body. So I'll open and close two sets of curly braces. I'll set up the greater than sign and then provide the partial footer. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and knock this out for index down below. That is going to be footer. And finally, we're going to knock it out for about right here, footer. Now you'll notice that for about and index, we do have the old text in place. I didn't mention to remove that for the challenge. Maybe you did. I am going to go ahead and remove it. If you didn't remove it, take a quick moment to do just that. So now in about, we have these three things. In index, we have just two. And in help, we have the three items we had earlier. Now that we have this in place and we don't have any duplicate footers, let's go ahead and test things out. I'm going to save help.hbs. I'm going to refresh the page. Here I'm on the home page and I see my footer. I'll go over to the about page where I also see it. And finally, the help page where it's showing up. So that is it for partials. Partials can be used throughout your application to make it really easy to render the same thing over and over again. As we saw, we can still inject values inside of them. We did that for the name in footer and for the title in header. Now that we have that all wrapped up and we've tested our work, I'm going to remove those challenge comments, and that's where we're going to stop for this one. In the next video, we'll continue to learn more about our server and Express, so stay tuned, and I'll see you then.